Okay, we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar presentation. My name is Valerus-ViconNet, and I am the Director of Marketing at Vicon Security, and we are happy that you joined us today. Our presentation today is going to focus on an overview of our new ViconNet to Valerus Gateway module, which will be presented by Guy Arazi. Just a few housekeeping details before we start. First, a link to the on-demand version of this presentation will be emailed to all registrants after the presentation is over. Second, there is a gateway brochure handout which you can access through the panel where it says handouts. It's a PDF file of the gateway module. And also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and at the end we'll have some time to answer some of those questions. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Guy Arazi, who is the Director of Product Management here at Vicon.
Thank you, Valerus. I appreciate the introduction. Great to be here, and let me switch over to the presentation and we'll get going. So what we'd like to do today is go over a few things. I do see a lot of familiar names which are ViconNet users in our list, but I do see a lot of new names, and we would like to present first a few highlights of the company. For those of you not familiar with Vicon and where we are today, we'll cover some of that information. Then we'll give a quick overview and a quick demo of the current running Valerus VMS, which is our currently selling product. And then we'll talk about the gateway, which is the way to get you from ViconNet to Valerus, and a pretty sophisticated way, we think. At the end, I'm going to cover some of the highlighted features, what we can do through this gateway and how this all works, and we will take some questions. We should have time to take a few select questions at the end. The rest, as Valerus said, we will answer over email. So let's get started. First, let's talk a little bit and remind those of you who know and those of you that are new to us who Vicon is. Vicon has been a leader in the CCTV and the security industry for over 50 years. And you can see this timeline we're showing here on this slide, showing our starting at 1967 and really growing with the industry through the whole evolution of analog products, matrix products, muxes, analog cameras, analog PTZ, and starting the beginning of the 2000s, starting the transition to IP with IP cameras and with our ViconNet VMS. Today, at the end of 2017 going into 2018, we are selling our new VMS, Valerus, along with a new and sophisticated line of IP cameras, and we are here to stay 50 years and going. We focus our solutions today on standards-based, and on this, I'll talk about it in a minute in a different slide, is really the de facto standard in our industry. We're trying to be a true standards-based like we were when PAL and NTSC were the standards for analog. Today, we're trying to do the same here in the world of IP. We believe in collaborative environments. We like to work with the right resellers in the different places around the globe to provide our customers with the best channel as well as the best support. Our company has offices around the world, and we serve different markets from those offices. And we were actually the first, we believe, to offer a comprehensive end-to-end professional services solution to allow customers not only to buy our equipment and our software and our licenses, but also to have us do all the pre-configuration and actually come, install, and inspect it for them. We also pride ourselves on being the leading A&E support program in the industry, supporting these important group of people and that community with the tools and the information they need to simplify and make their efforts more efficient. All right. The markets we serve, we are very strong in healthcare, We have a few hospitals, and actually, if you go to our website, you can see a few very interesting case studies that we published about these locations: Department of Defense, retail, courts, municipalities, and more. And what we bring to the table today, we bring an option for anybody buying and selling our equipment to be an end-to-end system from us. We can offer all pieces and parts, including access control, including the new generation cameras, including hardware and storage and everything that you might need, but we also offer the same solution, one, in pieces. If you want to get just the VMS or just cameras, we can do that. And we also sell the VMS and our solutions as software only. So we do give an option no matter what you need to buy. Let's go and talk about Valerus. And the version I'm showing here today is our version 18. We actually released this version 2 weeks ago. And this is the third release of Valerus since its initial launch, which was about a year and a half ago. What is Valerus? What is the concept here? Valerus, one, it's important for those of you that came from ViconNet to know Valerus was written from scratch. We did not just give ViconNet a facelift, so-called, and do anything like that. We actually decided it is time for us to create a new VMS that stands up with the latest standards. It is a true standards-based system. I did mention before that we want to be today to the industry what people did in the past with PAL and MPC, and the standard we're following is the OMSIF standard in the industry. What we lead with in the design and in the improvements we do for Valerus is really the concept that we need to offer a simple, a friendly, and a cost-effective solution, because there is so much confusion and so much complication out there in the VMS market that it is time to simplify it and allow a better solution. When we talk about simplicity, when we talk about ease of use, we are looking at all the different stakeholders using the VMS and then trying to allow all of them an easier life. So if we look at the beginning, at the sales stage, we intentionally avoided having a Chinese menu-like price list where you have to decide and pick which feature goes with which camera, which option has to be completing another option, and things like that. What we've done is we defined a very simple 3-tier model where you can just pick which tier your system falls under, and the entire system gets covered license-wise under that tier. Much simpler. For the person installing the system and deploying it, we provide a very, very important, and I'll say more about it, thin client browser-based architecture. We do not have a client installation. I'll get back to that in a minute. We also have highly automated discovery tools, configuration tools that can help to get a big system up, running, and recording in a very short time. We offer a single activation key, one license for the entire system in one location. Unlike ViconNet, I'll make some references for those of you familiar with ViconNet. Unlike ViconNet, where you had to register and activate licenses per NVR per workstation, in Valerus, one license key manages the entire system, and if you need to update anything, that single license key is what you update. And as I mentioned before, we still offer our pre-configuration services. So for those who need to save their own time, their own labor, and would like to get the system from Vicon, pre-configured, IP addresses, names, deployment around the system and all that, we can do it for you. We offer that as a factory service, and we can also offer people to come down to the field and do that with you as well as commission the system. For the operator, and it's important to remember many times that at the end of the line, the person operating the system really needs to have a user-friendly, accessible, and easy system to use and not a complicated IT deep menu, which will make their life more complicated. So what we're offering them is a very flexible and very intuitive user interface. I'm going to show you the actual system in a couple minutes. Preset favorites, wherever we can provide default presets and allow some guesswork to be taken out of the equation, we do that. We allow simple ways to group cameras and to present views. I'd like to show you that on the live system. Grouping based on your architecture, creating a list by building, creating a list by location, a geographical representation of the system. That's full compatibility with on-this cameras, whether there are Vicon on-this cameras or open, any industry open on-this camera. And we offer simple, powerful video search options that are accessible and allow you to go through the video and minimize your forensic work. And at the end, also very important, is the person that has to maintain the system. We have a very, very strong health dashboard that can quickly show what the system status is. We have built-in statistics that allow you to take looks at the deployment of recording, who's doing the recording according to the settings, are there any problems in the system, what's the bandwidth, and things that I will demonstrate in the live demo. We allow to automatically back up all the system settings, so if something fails, we can use that backup to restore the settings and not have to rebuild systems manually and painfully. We allow upgrades to be done by push centrally. Again, I'm referring to those of you familiar with Vicon. With ViconNet, you would have to go to the NVRs, to the workstations, and to those computers separately and update them when the update came out. With Valerus, that's not necessary anymore. And we also offer an upgrade protection plan that allows you always to be up to speed and running the latest software. From an architecture point of view, one, it's important to say that Valerus is extremely scalable. It can start as a small mini server with 2, 3, 16 cameras on one machine and work with a local store, or it can grow up to thousands and thousands of channels. Actually, we have no limitation on the size of the system and what it can grow to. The second thing, which I mentioned, is on this. A few years ago, even when we were promoting ViconNet, we looked at the standard in our industry, and really the only standard in the industry, and said we would like to be compliant with a standard. And we've started selling our cameras with ViconNet as OnVIF supported. OnVIF has improved and grew through the years, and now it's offering a very, very solid interface, which more than likely any OnVIF camera you will connect to Valerus will give you the 90% functionality you expect from a camera to give you. Live streaming, control from the VMS, PTZ control, different profiles, all these things work. OnVIF keeps improving and now are adding solutions for playback from the cameras and other places, and we reach that 100% pretty quickly. OnVIF, interestingly enough, is also looking into specifying and finally creating standards for access control, which is something that we do as well as others. I mentioned that thin client architecture, and I'd like to spend a couple of minutes and talk about the importance of having a thin client architecture. Many VMSs out there, even ViconNet, had a web client. That web client is typically a thinner version of what you can do with the full client. In Valerus, we said we would like to go and take advantage of the fact that people are very comfortable in using web browsers in their day-to-day business. We all browse to our bank accounts. We all use the browser every day to do searches and do all that, and we're all pretty comfortable using a browser on the day-to-day tasks that we have. So what are the benefits of using a thin client on a browser instead of installing a local client? First, you have access from any computer. Unlike using a thick client where you would have to go and install that client to get access to the VMS, here, using a browser, all you need to do is open the browser and log in. From that, you can obviously understand that you have lower IT support costs. If IT has to run and maintain and install and update and keep track of those clients on the different machines, it's money. With the browser is there, you open it up and you can work. When it comes to licensing, which I mentioned, the central licensing, there's no need to register and keep track of what's installed where and who has a license. You just open the browser and manage it centrally. And quick in setup. So if you take off the time, the need to do all the installs and the maintenance and the configuration and all that, we save a lot of time. The setup is quicker, and it is way more flexible. When it comes to updates, if in a client there's a new version, you have to update that client version. With a browser, like we do every day when we go to CNN weather and we want to see what changed, we can hit our refresh button and get a clean, new, refreshed image that we can use. Another important piece that kind of closes the information here is what we call our UPP program. We know it is important to you to always run the latest version. The reason for that is the latest version will always have the latest bug fixes, the latest code. Tech support has an easier time supporting you when you have the latest, and you want it because you want to be on what's latest and greatest. What we decided and what we're offering with Valerus, that even if you chose not to have our UPP, which is our upgrade protection plan, let's say you just bought the system and you don't want to buy that program, which I'll explain in a minute, we will still provide you with every release of the version, all the Valerus corrections, all the bug fixes, all the enhancements, cosmetics, changes, and things that are out there. You get all of those. There's no charge. You can update your system. You can keep being on the latest version. We're not preventing you from keeping up with the latest release. So I mentioned we're right now on version 18. Somebody that was running our former version would go to our website, get version 18, and update the system, get all the bug fixes and all the enhancements for free. The UPP itself, here, not having this UPP, is not tied to Vicon's support in any way. So your choice not to buy UPP from us does not take away your ability to get our support. However, we do believe it is important and a good idea to buy our UPP. So let's explain quickly what that UPP gives you, and I'm sure you'll see the benefit in buying. That's Upgrade Protection Program. We operate in a 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year package, by the way. We'll include, on top of the upgrade on the left there, we'll also give you any new major feature that the new version includes. For example, in version 18, we offered as a new feature, we added support for redundant application servers when there's a failure on the main one. That's a new feature. That feature, if you don't have a UPP and you upgrade, that feature would not be unlocked for you. Some of the cosmetic changes, like snapshots and things like that that we've added to the UI will be unlocked because those are minor enhancements. You get minor enhancements for free, major upgrades only if you're covered by the UPP, but you're still running latest code, greatest bug fixes version. You have, by the way, when you buy UPP, we show you in the system what's the status, how long does it have to go, and before it expires, we'll let you know so you can renew it. What are the Valerus components? I'll make a parallel to ViconNet again. An application server, which is the parallel to the ViconNet nucleus. This is really the brains of the system. This is where all the configuration is stored. Only one of these exists per system, like the nucleus in ViconNet. And if you have a small system, a standalone, we talked about scalability, you can combine recording server with the application server and have an all-in-one solution. If you have multiple cameras in a bigger system, you're going to need more recording server so they can handle the cameras. These record all the video and actually provide video services to the client. We support up to 100 cameras per NVR. That actually depends on the specific NVR, and those specifics show on our website and data sheet. And we have many versions, with RAID, without RAID, with central SAN, standalone, and many, many options. The client stations are really the same for the admin and the viewing client because we are using a browser here. So this is where the thin client starts making sense. You get full viewing capabilities. And of course, in our day and age, for those of you running around with your phone and with your tablet, we've got to have mobile clients. And these are both from phone and tablet, and both for Apple and Google. You can find the Valerus app right now on these stores. I'd like now to do a quick switch over and spend a few minutes, give you a taste of what the Valerus application looks like, and then we'll proceed. So I'm going to switch over here. And as you can see, I'm just opening here my browser. And this is, once we log into the system, this is the Valerus screen. I'll make it a little bigger here so we can look around. And what you can see immediately is that the whole Valerus application is really built like we see in web pages today. It's built around flat look. It's built around tabs, so I can actually add more tabs here. I can move the tab out and control multi-monitor. That's another difference from ViconNet, is the fact that we can have multi-monitors on a Valerus application just by moving these tabs to other monitors, and we can deploy video on all of them. We have a few internal applications, the monitoring, which is the one we're looking at. This is the primary application for the operator. We have the search. I'm going to get in there in a minute. We have the whole configuration area, which is typically where the administrator goes. But I just want to give you a quick look at how simple and clean the design is here. We're working really, really hard to allow a very clean and very flat design with no extra information and additional data that might end up just confusing instead of helping. For example, all the information for an NVR is in one place, including drive allocation, simple bars, simple data, check marks for everything is okay, and things like that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the configuration. I do want to mention that on our website and on our YouTube channel, you can find webinars that we gave on Valerus itself with a lot of good video demonstrations showing all these capabilities in configuration and in the other places. Back in monitoring, the simple drag and drop you would expect, and you can see that we keep things flat. In a single screen, if we want to change layouts, we have multiple layouts that we can choose for and make the different selections from. Playback. And really, I should show, once I hover my mouse up here, we're getting buttons. And this is really our context menu, which will show the different options depending on the camera. A PTZ camera will have different options, such as presets, and then a static camera that has other options. Playback, if I hit my playback button up here, you can see that we offer playback. Unlike ViconNet, we open a timeline right on the live video. And you can see the red line down here showing the recording. When I hover the mouse at any location here, you will see that we give a quick snapshot so you can really see what's going to be shown at the point where you hover the mouse. And you can just click on the mouse and switch to playback. You'll see on the right down here that we switch. The video, by the way, is a clip I'm playing in the background. We are not spying on any casinos. You can see that you get a timestamp, all the playback controls, everything that we have here, including loop playback options, playback from time, which opens a calendar showing where we had recording. Again, the red line and the snapshots show you where you are and can be used. More of that, please go and look at our webinars showing the specifics of these versions. Another option, you can start from the top here. Live or playback is digital zoom, where we show the big picture here, and I can decide I want to focus on this area and do digital zoom in and out using the mouse wheel. Very accessible, very easy to do. I can grab this and move around from here as well. Very simple to get to your digital zoom with one click of a button. Last important from here, again, simplifying the life of those who need to export video. You can get access to export right from here for a camera. We actually have some access from here for everything shown in the tab. So if I have multiple cameras, we can start an export for those. And let's just do an example of that. I'm going to actually get a view that I prepare in advance. And instead of one camera, I'll drag a view. And you can see that it switches all 4 cameras in one shot. You can prepare these views in advance, day shift, night shift, and just switch them over. No complicated macros in the ViconNet Word. So I can now go hit my export button for the whole thing, and you can see it picked up all the cameras. I can go and change the time and date if I need for specific cameras or for all of them. We can add the player to the export. We can lock it with a password. We can add additional resources if we forgot to specify them. Everything is very simple, very flat, and super accessible. I mentioned search. Let's take a look at what we have here under the search tab. We have 3 search options. One is thumbnail search, similar to what we have in ViconNet. Thumbnail search allows to take a certain camera, define a time period, and get a snapshot every few minutes over that timeline. So we selected about a 3-hour time period, and I can show a snapshot every few minutes. We can look for an object that we're looking for. Say I'm looking for this person here. I can now narrow down my thumbnail search between 2 thumbnails, get a very clear indication of what happens, find the person, and start playback right at that point. I can now pause, I can control my playback, I can start my export right from here, I can do my digital zoom like we showed before right from here. All my results still show here on the left, so if I want to go and change those and say, oh, it was a different person, I can do it right away. The second option, I'm actually going to switch quickly to our New York system just so we have a better shot, is museum search. I'm sure those of you who've been with us with ViconNet know museum search, and that depends on the devices that support museum search. We can get an area, this is the outside of our New York building, highlight a certain area, and tell the system, I'd like to search for changes in this area that took a certain time, that included objects of a certain size, and when we run that search, the system is going to go and quickly search the database for changes in that area. We can now scroll down instead of playing back and doing all that, locate what we want to see, and again, do a click on one of those images to start the video and see what happened during that time. The last search option we have here is the events framework, which supports our integration module. So we have an integration module called Events Framework that allows us to connect to external systems, a license plate recognition system, facial recognition. We have a list of different vendors that we can integrate with and get video from and allow us to monitor that. We do have, I'm going to close this, we do have direct access to our VAX access control system. So if you have not only Valerus, but you also have our VAX access control system, it is integrated right into the Valerus user interface. I'm not going to go into that right now. I do want to give you a quick look of what the dashboard looks like. And I mentioned that our dashboard is really meant to give you a few types of indication. One, for all the pieces of hardware in the system, it gives you a count and also tells you how many are healthy, how many have errors, how many have problems, and some useful information. Right now, we're looking at the statistics report for the NVR. You can see we show things like which devices is this NVR recording, how much storage space is a certain device taking on this NVR? What's the bandwidth graph? Over time, this is a day, I'll switch to a week, which allows you to find trends and understand what's going on and if something really changed and happened. How do you look against your configuration? If I'm allowed 70 cameras and I have 10, I'm right in the blue zone. If I'll exceed some of these, it will go red and it will tell you so. For specific cameras, just a quick look at statistics. You can see how they're recorded. What's the method? Is it FIFO? How many days are expected? In this case, we have expected 7 days. We're getting 11 days. We are getting green check mark. If I go in here, you see that we have some graphs for the cameras as well. Bandwidth, expected versus estimated. Extremely useful tools. I'll go back to this screen here. One last thing I want to mention, being a browser-based system, there is nothing easier for us than to bring into the system a web page. I just entered CNN weather here, knowing that we have some weather coming into the Northeast. And I can do that. I can combine that in a view. I can combine that as a single screen in a tour, in changes and things like that. And before we switch back to the presentation, just a mention of the ability to control 360-degree cameras. So we did put into Valerus the ability to use these cameras and to actually zoom in as well as play around and move inside these cameras aspect ratio on demand. We are always recording the sphere, but we can dive in and zoom in and manipulate the video, de-warp, as we call it, at any given time. All this, again, I'm mentioning you can see on our webinars that are on our YouTube as well as the Vicon History. So now that I've talked a little bit about Vicon itself and a little bit about Valerus, we're here to talk about how can we get you, ViconNet users, to Valerus. So before I talk about the gateway itself, I want to talk about the challenge that we had before we released this gateway and actually created it. And what we wanted to do is to provide a simple, as we said, simple is what we are trying to look at all times, simple solution to provide our loyal ViconNet users an upgrade path to Valerus without having to ask them to rip out ViconNet and install a new system, without having to actually go back and do complicated upgrades on ViconNet, without having to deal with extremely sensitive database conversion. Really, we came to the conclusion that if we can allow you to move from ViconNet to Valerus without even touching your ViconNet system, that would be the ideal solution. What we came up with is this ViconNet Gateway. And the ViconNet Gateway is really a module. It's a Valerus module that we've designed to bridge the existing ViconNet system. Please note, we're looking, we support back down to ViconNet version 5.6b and higher to Valerus. So if I'm kind of looking at the diagram down here, you'll have an existing ViconNet system. I'll show a few more examples as we keep going. And we want to take the video and audio from those through our gateway and allow you to start working on Valerus and expanding and growing on Valerus, not on Vicon. The key here is, of course, to provide you with a simple migration path. We do offer, like everything we do, pre-installed on Vicon factory certified hardware, but we also offer it as a software module if you want to use your own cost solution. We support ViconNet systems with up to 500 cameras per gateway. We can support more than 500. Each gateway can support up to 500. I'll show an example of that. And the gateway actually can be installed if you have a small size system on the application server, which is the Valerus module. Up to 75 cameras you can still run on that same computer and save some hardware. So the building blocks for that gateway, we have three pieces. Hardware-wise, we can offer you a pre-installed Vicon certified gateway where you get the hardware for us, or you will use our specifications and provide your own virtualized or physical hardware solution. Software-wise, on this gateway, we're running the Valerus-ViconNet Gateway software. It's a piece of software which you're going to have to load or run on that. We're also loading and running ViconNet 8.3. 8.3 is the latest release of ViconNet. And this allows it, between these two, to communicate with ViconNet. Obviously, we said it has to speak both with ViconNet on one side and with Valerus. This is how we do that. The specifications for the gateway are actually similar to our NVR specifications. Those of you who already saw some Valerus specs, those are not very high, incredibly expensive specifications. We are trying to use good quality machines, but not insanely powerful where we don't need it. Licensing-wise, and this is a unique offering. What you license when you add a ViconNet system to Valerus through a gateway is a license per gateway computer. Whether that gateway computer is bridging 10 cameras, 100 cameras, or 500, which is the maximum, you're paying one license for the gateway. Through the gateway, we are not counting how many cameras, we're charging by gateway. The ViconNet installation I mentioned here does not require a ViconNet license. It's just installed there as a ViconNet viewer, for those of you familiar. So let's look at a couple of examples, make it a little more real. Small system. So I've defined a small system as a ViconNet system that we want to connect to Valerus through the gateway, and we have up to 75 cameras. 75, you see, as you remember, is what we allow in a standalone. These cameras, by the way, can be direct IP cameras on ViconNet. They can be collectors on ViconNet. They can be encoders. The key here is everything stays on ViconNet. Recording remains on ViconNet. The solution is we're going to add a new server. I'm going to show you that in the diagram to the network. And we're using 1 gig port. That's pretty much the standard for every computer today. The server, that one single server, will run both the Valerus Application server and the ViconNet Gateway software, 2 modules that we talked about. Up to 75 cameras, we can still do that on one machine. We're not overloading that computer. License-wise, there'll be 1 gateway license only. All the cameras are on ViconNet. Everything is coming through the gateway. Nothing plugs in directly to Valerus at this time. So if we look at it in a diagram, this would be our ViconNet system with a nucleus and some IP cameras and encoders and collectors and everything that we had here in the back. The users will have their ViconNet workstations and possibly some VMDCs, depending on what the system does. And now we're going to add that new Valerus server, which is the application server and the ViconNet gateway right here. And this allows us to go back to these workstations, again, down to 5.6D and the generation of the computers. If these are ancient Windows 95 computers, they probably didn't support ViconNet either, but certainly will not support Valerus. But Windows 7 and latest technology should be fine. We have all that information to provide. On these now, when the Valerus gateway is around and everything can talk Valerus, what we can do is just shut down the ViconNet application here and start using Valerus. Start using Valerus is launch the browser, connect to your Valerus server, and here you go. So there's no additional installation here. There's no changes on your ViconNet system here. Little programming, but no upgrades, no conversions, nothing in the back here. Let's grow this to a bigger system, and that's a single gateway solution. This is really the typical system. Most ViconNet systems out there will have up to 500 cameras. It's not a bad count. They'll have their 50, 100, 200, 300 cameras. And typically that would be the ViconNet system that you find out there. The cameras, again, can be direct IP on that ViconNet side, encoders, collectors, old surveyor, VFCs, whatever you have. In this case, the solution gets a little more complicated, just a little. We're going to add two servers. We had one before, we're going to add two servers on their 1 gig ports. One server for the application server. The other server will be the gateway. Still, license-wise, we have a license for one gateway. The application server itself doesn't carry its own license. It doesn't need one. It manages the license. That's where the license gets loaded. But we pay for the connections, and there's one gateway. It can be 500 cameras, one gateway. Pretty good. So the same diagram where we start, I just changed it and said, okay, maximum 500 cameras. And we're adding two servers. Our application server will need its own dedicated hardware. And our gateway is going to use its own dedicated hardware. The reason here is really load balancing. They're going to do more work because there's more cameras, and we'd like to have more CPU power to do that. Here, same deal. The ViconNet workstations, even the VMDCs, depending on what you need to do with your system, are going to switch over and start using Valerus. It is important to mention that even in former Valerus versions, if you want to keep your VMDCs, and some places have these VMDCs doing big video walls and some switching that they like the way VMDC handles it, we still have a way to keep your VMDC and use Valerus and keep working. So you don't necessarily have to rip out your VMDCs if you do this. It really depends on how you're architected and where you're trying to take this. Last example here would be multiple gateways. And there's a couple of ways where multiple gateways would be required. One, which is pretty simple, is because we said a single gateway can support up to 500 cameras, we might need, if the system exceeds 500 cameras, more than one gateway. The other one would be if we have multiple sites. If we have a site in New York, and one in California, and one in Kansas, we don't want one gateway in New York to be managing the whole thing, because we don't need somebody in California watching local video to stream the video through New York. That makes no sense. So if we look at that, the solution here would be to add as many servers as you need at the right locations, and I'm going to show that on the diagram. One server, the application server, typically a dedicated one when the system is this big. Additional servers for the gateways where they need to be. And the license would be depending on how many gateways. 2 gateways, 2 licenses. 10 gateways, 10 licenses. So the diagram here, a little different. I'm saying we have ViconNet Site A, let's say in New York, and Site B in California. And when people use Site A here, it makes no sense that a single gateway somewhere in New York or in California will have to provide the video because of latency and internet and connections like that. So what we're suggesting is to put the local gateway in each site. We can add another one centrally if that makes sense, depending on the architecture, depending on who sees the video from where. This is not necessarily what we need to do. The application server will typically be in a central location. And when these guys will watch their cameras, they're going to be handled through the local gateway. These guys will be handled through the local gateway. And from here, when we switch these stations to Valerus, they're going to get their video from the respectful gateway. This is all done automatically by the system as soon as you tell each site which gateway to use. Very simple, very, very efficient when you don't want to be streaming bandwidth or using bandwidth streaming back and forth. So to summarize this, these few examples, I'd like to share what can we do when we connect these gateways and what can we still get from those ViconNet systems over the gateway. So first, and obviously very important, is you can call up live video and audio from ViconNet through the gateway on Valerus. When I showed you Valerus in the user interface, the cameras coming from the gateway are going to look on that interface exactly the same like they do for directly plugged-in cameras. So the user experience on Valerus is no different when you use local cameras to Valerus or cameras coming through the gateway. Playback of audio, we did say that everything is still recorded. Keep getting recorded on the ViconNet system. Playback comes through the gateway, plays in the Valerus system, you get your timeline, you get your playback, you get your snapshot, everything works. If you have a PTZ camera on ViconNet, we can control that PTZ from Valerus like you would a local connected camera. We can dework those 360 cameras even if they're on the ViconNet side. So what I showed you with the dework will work. We can perform thumbnail search and museum search on video that's still being recorded on those ViconNet devices, including collectors in the back and things like that. We can now perform the export, that export example I was showing you. We can do that from the Valerus interface for video still being recorded on ViconNet. And all the recording, it's important, stays on ViconNet. We're not adding an NVR, we're not changing the recording. It stays on ViconNet until you start migrating those to Valerus. So pretty much everything you need can be done through the gateway. Of course, like everything in life, not everything can be done. Here's a couple limitations that are worth mentioning. The gateway itself, that the software cannot run on a machine running Valerus NVR. So if you have a computer as an NVR, it cannot serve as a gateway. We will need an extra machine for that. Each gateway can support up to 500 cameras. That's a CPU limitation, and more than that, we add a gateway. So we're not limited with the number of cameras, but we will need more horsepower. The computer running the gateway should not really be used for display. That computer doing that translation and information transfer from ViconNet to Valerus, it should not be your client as well. I think that actually makes sense. ViconNet functionalities that cannot be supported through the gateway right now. Events that happen on ViconNet. If we have motion detection in ViconNet, it doesn't go through to Valerus. We can't see those, for example, do a pop-up of a camera on Valerus if it's done on ViconNet. If we need those cameras can be transferred to Valerus, and we have a few that will be directly connected to Valerus and others that will be coming through the gateway if that functionality is critical. If you have relay operation on ViconNet that cannot be controlled from Valerus, again, if we do have some cameras that require that, there's always an option to move them to Valerus. But you don't have to move the entire system. And I'll explain that move thing in a second here. And the playback control speeds are a little less sensitive when coming through the gateway. There's more work being done to play back from ViconNet through the gateway to Valerus, so the speeds, we have only 3 fast forward and rewind speeds rather than 5 or 6 if we have for cameras recorded on Valerus. Again, not a big price to pay when you look at all the advantages that we get from the gateway. So let's summarize and then we'll move to some of your questions. We did see that this gateway is our way to go back to you guys and offer you a simple and as painless as possible migration path from your existing ViconNet system without touching it, without upgrading it, without making changes that can break it, and take you to the Valerus system. Long run, going forward, the strategy is obvious. You will want to move everything to work directly with Valerus. So this allows you to do that over your time and with the budget you have. You don't have to say overnight, 100% of the system now goes Valerus. You can now make decisions and say, well, I have the budget to move 10 cameras today. You're going to get a Valerus NVR, plug those cameras in, take them off ViconNet. Tomorrow you have the budget to replace 2 collectors with encoders or with IP cameras, you'll do that. And slowly, when you do that, you'll be moving your system at your leisure from ViconNet to Valerus, with the end game being to have everything on Valerus and to retire your ViconNet system. I hope all of this makes sense, and we'll start taking a look at your questions and see if we can answer some of those and shed some more light on this information. So I'm going to open my question bar here. Bear with me. I'll try and see if I can read a few questions.
Guy, while you check the questions, I'll just remind everyone, if they do have a question, just be sure to type it in the GoToWebinar control panel box, and we'll be able to answer it.
So I have a great question here, and somebody is asking me, does the Valerus web application rely on Silverlight? That's a question from obviously somebody familiar with ViconNet that used Silverlight. The answer is no. The Valerus application is not dependent on Silverlight. It is a full browser, real browser application. That dependency is no longer a problem. I have a question here about the link to the webinar. All those webinars can be found right from our webpage, as well as if you go into YouTube and type in Vicon, you will find every video content that we've published. The question, will the dashboard be able to check system status of the ViconNet system? So the answer to that is unfortunately no. We do see the status of the gateway itself. If the gateway would be offline, we will get an indication in the dashboard, but we don't see the individual camera status through the gateway. Those events currently don't come through. The question about, are there limitations in terms of the number of users that can access a system at once? So no, there really isn't. The licenses that we provide, I talked about the tiers. In the core tier, in the lower tier that we have, we limit to 10 concurrent users. So you can have multiple users in the system, only 10 using it at once. In the pro tier, which is the high tier, there's no limitation. You can have as many as you need. Good question here about if I have an existing ViconNet system which is running a version lower than 5.6b. We did mention that that's the lowest version we support with the gateway. What do I do to go to Valerus? It's a good question, and there might be two options here. One, your system might be new enough to be upgraded to version 5.6b, and then you can use the gateway. It depends really on the age of the hardware and the operating system. We have those guidelines with Vicon. And the other option that you have would be to look at what cameras and what equipment you have there, which we can help you with, and see what you can do to maybe move those directly to Valerus and keep them. It really depends on the age of the system. Good question about licensing. From a licensing point of view, there is no per channel license ever. So the answer is, when you connect the gateway, and I mentioned that, we charge you for the gateway. If that gateway is bridging 100 cameras to 200, we're still charging you one gateway license. As you move your cameras over time from ViconNet to Valerus, and maybe you get new cameras instead of collectors, and maybe those cameras can be moved directly, we will charge you at that point for what you connect to Valerus. So at the time you move them to Valerus, then we will see which cameras you have and what do you have to connect them with. Another good question, this is going to be the last question we can take because we're starting to get to the end of our hour. We have an older system using analog style cameras. What would we do to migrate it to Valerus? So again, you have two options. If those older analog style cameras are on collectors, you can get the gateway and connect through the gateway to Valerus, or you can get a new Valerus encoder from us. Move those analog cameras to the Valerus encoder, and now you can put them directly on the Valerus system and retire your system. I do see many more questions, but the time here is not going to allow it. So what we will do is we will collect all these questions and answer them, and Dolores is going to explain the process right after me.
Thank you very much, Guy. Yeah, so anybody else with questions that weren't answered, we'll be answering them via email right after the presentation. Thank you so much for everyone for participating and being on our webinar today. As Guy said, a recorded version will be emailed out to everybody, a link to listen to it. And if you could, please just take a brief moment at the end of this. You'll receive an email with a link to take a quick short survey. It's just a few questions. We would appreciate it. And again, thanks so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time.